car crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with the attorneys of Hollis, Wright.
Good evening and welcome. You are watching The Attorneys. I'm your host, Art Franklin. And we're talking about a topic that is essential for every entrepreneur and every business owner. We're talking about business law. And joining us tonight, we have a couple of guests with us. Is Gabe Tucker and Bing Edwards. So glad to have you guys joining us this evening.
Thank you. We're glad to be here.
All right, so this started because I met one of y'all's lawyers at an Auburn event, and I knew that this would be a really good fit for the show because we have a lot of people out there that watch and may be entrepreneurial in nature, may be interested in starting businesses, or maybe an established business that needs help. That's kind of what you guys do. So Fortive is the entity that you guys work at. Tell us a little bit about it and just kind of explain how you put this whole thing together, because the team that I met with the first time when I came to your office, I was super impressed.
Oh, that's very kind.
So really tell us a little bit about it.
Well, and we really do appreciate the opportunity to be here, so thank you very much. I started Fortive, what is now called Fortive, 8 years ago. I'd been at a big law firm for, I suppose, about 18 years, and I wanted to do something a little more entrepreneurial. And so over that period of time, we have now grown to have 10 lawyers. And it is, it's an amazing experience every day. If you ask any of us what we do, we will tell you that we try to make the communities that we live in better places to live and work. And we do that by representing really big businesses, by representing a huge number of startups. We help businesses with formation issues. We help businesses figure out the best ways to run or finance themselves. We help communities even figure out how to attract businesses of different types. And every day is different, and every day is just so enjoyable. So.
You know, it's interesting, when I went over and had a meet and greet, and we had coffee together. They're on our street, by the way. Their office is incredible. If you want to see a really cool office in Birmingham, go to Fortive. But one of the things that struck me is that you are unlike what I would define as a traditional business law firm, because I feel like you guys are more kind of leading, guiding, and directing businesses and communities, and almost serving in a consulting role more so than a defense role. Don't get me wrong, I know you do defense work, and you help people with business law issues, but to me it's almost like a consulting group in some sense. Have I missed that, or is that kind of a fair assessment?
That's totally true. You know, I would say you don't come to us to draft a contract or something like that. You come to us with an opportunity or a challenge, and we help figure that out in all the different ways that can be done. We actually have just recently launched a new entity called Fortive Advisors that, even in the name, really drives home the points you're making.
Interesting.
Absolutely.
All right, so Gabe, when I'm an individual that is coming in and I've got an idea and I'm thinking about starting a business, what's kind of the first thing that you do to sit down with that individual and talk through their idea and determine a business structure that works for them? How do you kind of handle that initial consultation?
Yeah, good question. So usually the first two things that I'll ask someone, whether they come to the office or I'm just talking to them over the phone, is, who's involved and where's the money coming from? Those are kind of the two fundamental starting places for a company. A lot of times you can have a solo founder who's bootstrapping everything, and that kind of brings with it its own recommendations and challenges. Sometimes you might have a group of founders who knew each other from college, or someone who might be more of a business person and someone who might be more of a subject matter expert if, for example, there's like some type of technology or science involved. With those groups, you really have to figure out, okay, who is going to own what, right? If there's going to be a majority owner, how much are they going to own? Who's putting capital on the table? Do we need to go raise money from other investors? Do we need to get a loan from a bank? So those are kind of the starting places. And then, with talking through all of those, the question initially is, what type of entity do you want to form?
And the different type of entity can impact taxation, can impact liability, whether the owners can be individually liable or the entity can be liable, all legal-based issues. But what's interesting, and I found super fascinating when I met with the Fortive folks, is, ultimately, they have experiences and they have different lawyers that have different experiences in areas that a business potential owner needs to understand. How do I navigate through this? How do I go negotiate an operating agreement so that I don't fire up my partner but give them a portion of it, but also protect myself when I'm setting my entity up? Like, again, this comes back to advisors, consultants, what lawyers were really intended to do from the start. So it's really fascinating.
Which is why they need, if you're watching at home, they need someone like Fortive. And when you're trying to determine if it's going to be a sole proprietorship, if it's going to be an LLC, what type of LLC it's going to be, do you help those who come to you, you look at what they actually have and say, maybe you were going down this path, but this is a better area for you to be in?
Yeah, absolutely. There are all kinds of different decisions that you have to make along the way. For example, what state do you want to create an entity in? Most people who we see, who we meet around town, Alabama is the right option for that. But the more sophisticated the business becomes, the more you have to think about like Delaware as a place to create the entity. And then, really probably the key issue is what type of entity. And the two most predominant types of entities that we create these days are corporations and LLCs. Corporations have a newer, they're newer in Alabama law. So, I'm sorry, corporations are older and they've been around a long time. They're more set in their ways of, like, you will have shareholders, you will have a board of directors, you'll have officers. LLCs have flexibilities in all of those sorts of things. And so they can be a much more easy to navigate way of making decisions and owning the business.
Two things though, S Corp.
Yeah, S Corp.
I was about to ask the same thing. That's good. That's good. We're thinking the same way.
S Corp, and also why Delaware? So there's the two things I want.
Yeah, well, Delaware has just grown up over time as being a pretty sophisticated place for big businesses to be, and man, they know it too. So it costs a lot of money to be in Delaware. It is not a cheap option for just trying to get an entity to give you some liability protection. S Corps are an interesting creature. They get tacked on top of the corporate form, but they allow for taxation more like an LLC, where the entity itself doesn't pay tax, but the tax attributes essentially flow through to the owners of it.
Which can have some advantages, but ultimately what individuals need if they're trying to form this is to have these questions for guys like you and to talk through it and say, hey, look, this will structure better for you based on the type of entity. If you're a cash business, if you're, a revenue-based business, whatever it may be, it all depends on sitting down and going through that.
Very true.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
I'll say, in all of those, if you don't think through it, there can be unintended consequences. The one that people are always most scared of is tax issues. And so it's always important, obviously, to talk to a lawyer, but also have a good accountant at the table.
All right, so I know we're going to break for the first break here, but when we come back, I want to have these guys talk just a little bit about some of the other stuff they do, because they have a very broad practice group. Being taught a little bit about helping communities, and they do some governmental-based consulting work. There's estate planning, all sorts of other things they do. I want to talk about some of that too.
All right, we'll get to it. We're just getting started as we're talking business law on this edition of The Attorney. So glad you can join us. I want to let you know that right now, Lawyers for Hollis Wright are standing by to take your call. It's a simple call. 1-844-LAW-TALK. 1-844-LAW-TALK, and you can reach someone at Hollis Wright right now. It is a free and confidential call. They're waiting to hear from you. We've got much more with Bing Edwards and Gabe Tucker as we're talking business law on The Attorneys. We'll take a break, but we'll be back. Stay with us right after this.
Here's some good information from our firm to you. Hollis Wright recently launched the Law Talk podcast. With podcasts becoming so popular, this will be a simple way to provide our loyal viewers with more opportunities to access information about important legal topics and to learn more about our firm and how we can help you if the need ever arises. There are many ways to access the Law Talk podcast. You can simply scan the QR code on your screen. Also, episodes are always available on the Hollis Wright YouTube channel, as well as on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you consume your podcasts. Just search up Hollis Wright in the Law Talk podcast. Don't wait, take advantage and listen today. Thanks for watching The Attorneys, and we know you'll enjoy the Law Talk podcast.
The Attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show in 2011, my goal was to do what our firm does best. Help people answer questions related to real-world legal issues they have in their lives in a way that's not intimidating to talk with a lawyer. If the issue is important to you, it's equally important to us, and we're ready to talk with you at no cost.
Yeah, oftentimes people are confronting various legal issues in their lives that really run the gamut of a lot of different legal practice areas such as bankruptcy, criminal law, civil law such as personal injury, divorces, domestic relations. And to be able to have a show once a week that covers those practice areas and answers people's questions in those areas, that's really the main objective of the show.
We use the resources of the many lawyers at our law firm to create a plan that has a lasting impact for each person that calls or texts. And we also give back to the community at the same time. We are here to serve you, the viewer, each week on The Attorneys.
Addiction kills hope.
But at Bradford, it all changes here.
Experience the difference
that proven treatment can make.
Find recovery. Find community.
At Bradford.
The topic is business law, and the show is The Attorneys, and we're here to give you the information that you need. We also want to remind you, there's a QR code on your screen. Go ahead, scan that QR code. That will get you in contact with someone at Hollis Wright. Also, all during the week, 24/7, you can reach us on our social media platforms on X, Instagram, and Facebook. Great content there, behind the scenes stuff. You really want to check that out throughout the week. As I said, we're talking The Attorneys. We're with Bing Edwards and Gabe Tucker. Gabe, I want to start with you, talking about the importance of really setting up your documents at the beginning of the formation of a business to try to head off some of the problems on the backside.
Yeah, man, I feel like I am working on that every day.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times when people get started, I mean, you don't know what you don't know, right? And you think that the only thing that you need to do is go online and form the entity. But depending on the type of entity, there are other documents that need to be put together. So the actual forming of the company is really quite simple, at least in Alabama. But when you look to the more sophisticated and complex documents that deal with ownership of the company, that deal with management of the company, it is so important to get all of that on paper from the beginning to prevent issues down the road.
I would think that also plays into the concept of a sale or an exit plan.
Oh, yeah.
If someone wants to exit out, those formation documents can have an impact on how they do that if the entity continues.
Yeah, absolutely. No one is going to want to buy the company if those documents don't exist.
Yeah.
A lot of times when you have a small business that is selling, there's some cleanup work that has to be done to make sure that everything is in order. And what we always tell people is getting all of that right on the front end is so much easier than waiting until the last second, and you're having to remember what you thought the agreement was. If you have different people involved, there are different types of exits too. I mean, you can have someone buying the company, you could have someone pass away, and their ownership maybe goes to one of the other owners, it goes to one of their family members, and you can put all of that in writing, how all of that works.
Bing, talk to us just a little bit about, I know you do some work with governmental entities. I also saw you guys do some alternative dispute resolution, estate planning, very broad there. But tell me just a little bit about kind of those practice areas that you've got lawyers in.
We have, with 10 lawyers who have a variety of experiences, we can really handle most anything that the biggest firms in town can handle. And so, dispute resolution is certainly a big part of what we do. On the governmental side, we do a large amount of grant writing. On the federal and state side, goodness, we have figured out ways to help businesses get unconventional funding through those kinds of programs for a long time. It's really great to do.
Well, and having that experience too, I know separates you guys because you've got that practice group from other entities of your size too.
Yeah.
So where do you see, from a business law perspective, where are things driving right now? What are you seeing that's popular, that's an issue that comes into your office most often right now, or kind of a trend you're seeing moving forward? I know those aren't always easy questions, but like people ask me all the time, what do you see on the plaintiff side? And there's certain things I see coming, and I see certain legislation coming and impacts that will probably happen in mass torts and those types of things. And I'm just wondering what is kind of a common issue right now that you guys see?
Two things I would say. One, there is a new law called the Corporate Transparency Act, which has
we've had this show.
People
we've had this show
freaked out.
Yes, up in arms. We had this entire show.
And luckily for at least like U.S.-based companies, the federal government has said, like, we're not going to enforce it. But that law was going to require essentially every small business to do a filing with the Department of Treasury, stating who your owners were. And so I feel like for most of 2024, it was just craziness. And then the second thing that we are getting a lot of questions with right now, deal with a lot of the executive orders coming out of Washington, and how that is, impacting the regulatory space. Tariffs are obviously a big question. So, we're speaking to a lot of different groups about the impacts.
And being up, I really want to talk about, an entrepreneur who's thinking about succession planning.
Yes.
You're an owner, and you have a son or a daughter, and you're trying to plan who's going to take over this company down the road.
Sure.
How should that be handled, and how important is that?
Yeah, well, those issues are important to figure out on the front end, especially with startup companies like you're talking about, where it's so important to have certain key people in the room and at the table making decisions. And if one of them passes away, then you really need, before that happens, you need to be making decisions about, well, does that ownership interest go to the other people who are actively working on the company? Does the family need to get paid some value for the work that the person who unfortunately died, was doing? All of those things, figuring them out on the front end is important from a business perspective, and then also from an individual perspective too. People need wills and estate plans quite often.
And one of the things I was going to ask is, it sounds like you're really a one-stop shop in that respect, where someone starts a business with you, but an owner needs an estate plan. You guys are capable of filling that gap for them.
And by having those be thought about at the same time is really a value add very important.
It's also a relationship-driven business, which is something that you're in.
Totally.
Now, I know we're about to lose Bing because we're going to bring on Madison Riggins, who is a lawyer at their group too, and we're going to talk about some other issues. But let me just say this. I'm fascinated by your business. I actually think Hollis Wright can do some business with you.
Cool. Love that.
With some of our succession planning and some of the stuff that we do. And so let's see if we can maybe work together in the future on some of this stuff.
And we want to come visit your office.
Well, come on. Yeah, we're only down the street.
I know.
We're down the street.
Yep.
Well, good. Thank you for being on, Bing. And I know Gabe's staying with us for this last segment. But when we come back, I do want to talk about, and Madison's going to come on, we're going to talk a little bit about intellectual property rights. That's a complicated legal issue, but she'll unwrap it, and Gabe will too, in a way that makes sense. And in addition, let's also talk a little bit about kind of the sports and media side of their business too.
Yeah, and Bing, that would be a cool visit to go to Hollis Wright too.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, we'll see you. And we want you to stay where you are right now, because we're going to continue the discussion. We're going to have Madison join us, but we'll keep the discussion on business law going. Also want to remind you that those lawyers at Hollis Wright, they're still standing by. You have just a little more time to get in contact with someone if you dial 1-844-LAW-TALK. That's 1-844-LAW-TALK. Someone from Hollis Wright will answer your call. It will be a free and confidential call. We'll take a break. We'll continue with our last segment right after this. Stay with us.
Thank you for watching The Attorneys each Sunday night, where we come to your living room to provide free legal advice in a confidential, off-air setting. Unfortunately, with the number of calls, texts, and emails that come in during the show, we can't always get to everything. But know this, Hollis Wright is open all week long. You call us at 844-LAW-TALK and we're going to answer your question for free. Thank you for watching The Attorneys, and we look forward to seeing you and talking to you soon.
If this place could talk, it wouldn't. It would sing and celebrate all of our stories of addiction recovery, victory, and community. This is Bradford Health Services. It all changes here.
Welcome back to The Attorneys. We're discussing business law and also reminding you to follow us on all the social media platforms, on X, on Instagram, and Facebook. Some really good content there, but we got a lot to get to in a short period of time. Madison Riggins is now joining us. Thank you so much for joining us. She's also with Fortive, and we've got Gabe still with us, and we want to talk about some intellectual property.
Yeah, intellectual property and sports law, but first of all, you're the reason this whole thing happened.
Yes.
Because I met you, and I knew immediately that you would be perfect for coming on the show. And so your personality just tells me you need to be a star like this.
Well, Art, Josh, thank you guys so much for having us on here. Hopefully it's not the last time, but we really enjoyed this entire experience, and it's really given us as a firm an opportunity just to really sit down and figure out what it is that we do. And like you said, we really are a one-stop shop, and that's something that we really pride ourselves on.
All right, so one of your specialties is in the area of sports law that kind of diverts over into some intellectual properties and NIL and those things. Tell us a little bit about that practice group.
Yeah, so it's something that really started kind of when I came on board, but it was really such a natural fit because Gabe here is actually a former athlete himself, and we have a couple different people in the firm who have been in and around the sports world their entire lives. So as you all know, NIL, name, image, and likeness, is a really big hot button topic amongst a lot of high school and collegiate student athletes. A lot of times when people think they need to engage a sports attorney, it's when they've already turned professional. But at this point, especially with the new NCAA ruling saying that high school students can enter into NIL negotiations.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big world. You guys start talking about this stuff when you were young. And so that's really kind of where Fortive is trying to fit into that entire market. So we're here to help educate parents, not just on contract review, tax guidance, because that is such a big part. I mean, you get this big check and you need to know what can you do with it. financial planning and all those types of things. You know, we tell them it's always good to have an accountant at your right hand, but also logo and branding. That's what really touches on the intellectual property side of things. We're really unique in that we have had a very healthy and robust intellectual property practice for a number of years. Most importantly, we have a licensed patent attorney. That is something that actually requires a separate bar that you have to take. That is not something that most firms that offer intellectual property services have. But also, a lot of us have done trademark work. So the reason why you want to engage a trademark attorney is because you want to make sure that you want to see if your logo or brand is something that is not already taken. We provide certain types of trademark searches. We'll search on both the Secretary of State's website as well as the United States PTO website and make sure that the logo and brand hasn't been taken. And if it hasn't, we're going to register it for you. And then we'll also monitor and make sure that no one else is misusing your logo or brand. I mean, that's what you see a lot of these big companies like McDonald's or Disney doing, but it's just as important for a student athlete as well.
Yeah, and I was going to ask that, like, how complicated is the marketing side of getting student athletes? That can't be easy.
Yeah.
Because I know it's a competitive world.
Oh, yeah.
We've done a couple NIL deals at our law firm with student athletes, and I know how competitive it is. That's got to be a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, and you know, we have a couple different avenues that has come in through. You know, I think, you know, Madison, you've done a great job getting out there and really meeting people, you know, who are involved in this. But we've also been contacted by people who themselves are interested in being agents, you know, but they like don't know how to review a legal contract, and so they need a lawyer's help. So we're kind of approaching it from a bunch of different angles.
Yeah.
I've seen that Georgia has allowed, from a state perspective, NIL deals. We've actually lost some high school basketball players and football players to Georgia.
Yeah.
I don't know if Alabama has pending legislation or if that's something that's being evaluated, but it certainly has become kind of a big deal that you can get NIL-based money in high school. Like, where does it end? Like, does it go to junior high at some point? Like, what does it come to Alabama, AAU? Like, where does this end?
Yeah. Well, I can definitely say we probably have no idea where it ends. I mean, we've seen it on both the professional and the collegiate level. It continues to evolve. High school really was just a natural next step. Alabama is actually only one of 6 states that does not have any sort of NIL law on the books for its high school students. At one point there was an NIL law, but it was really more so geared towards collegiate athletes, but it was more restrictive than what the NCAA allowed, so they repealed it when the NCAA began officially allowing NIL to happen. So we don't know what that looks like, but we are certainly hopeful that something will get on the books soon, because we want to make sure, like we said, that Alabama is a better place to live and work, and that really does start at such a young age, and being able to keep student athletes as well as their families in the state. And also, I know you and I are both Auburn grads up here, but as well as Alabama, UAB, Miles College, ASC, we want to make sure that we're able to send our student athletes to those universities. And it's a lot easier to recruit somebody when they're right in your backyard. You guys will be along for the ride no matter where it goes. I'm so glad that you guys came on, and I hope we will have you on in the future. And if someone needs to get in contact with you, they can come through us and we'll get them to you, or they can go directly to you. Thank you again for being on. Thank you.
So you did such a good job, and I love your firm.
Madison Riggins, Gabe, Tucker, thank you very much. Thank you for watching. That's all we have for now. We'll see you back here next week.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.